Let's do it.
Right.
Go, Mr. Chair.
Yes, we did.
Only for 5 minutes here.
But Durant's gonna speed to get here just for one item, or he's gonna, I had to stretch it out, man.
Good morning. We'll convene our meeting. We do have a quorum. Public comments at this time. Anyone from the public wishing to address the commissioners, please step up. All right. Seeing that, no one appear at the podium. We'll move approval of minutes. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Election of chair and vice chair, 2014.
Move Julie for chair.
Second.
I don't care how you vote.
Call for the vote on.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Julie, you're up.
I would nominate South County, I think that's Mike Metcalf.
Second.
For vice chair. Yep, was a second. Okay.
Who seconded that one?
Me.
Dave,
So you got
the other person here.
So you call for the vote?
Oh, you're turning it over to me right now?
Right now.
Yeah.
All right now, all right, all right.
You're the
All in
lady.
favor? Aye.
Okay, moving along. Oh, let me shut up.
I want that in the minutes.
Item on the agenda, whoa, thank you, is our legislative advocacy, and that would be Lindsay.
Good morning. You should have a small little packet of handouts in front of you on legislative items. And I'm not going to talk you.
Wait a minute, Lindsay, as a point of procedure, we got to do consent calendar. We did minutes.
Who moved the minutes?
Julie moved, I moved the minutes, Julie seconded.
Right, okay, let's go back.
I'll move
You
consent
skipped
calendar.
ahead. You move the consent calendar?
I move.
You're going to second? Okay. So first Hudson, second is Taylor. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries unanimously. See, when you jump off the calendar. Okay. Now, we're down to legislative.
No problem. As I mentioned, you should have a small little packet in front of you, and I'm just going to highlight a few items from them. We're trying something new again, and I'm trying to keep your legislative reports a little shorter than you may have seen them in the past, and kind of focus on the items that are part of our ledge platform. On the state legislation side, there's one particular item I want to point out, and it's AB 1724 Fraser CMGC Authority. This is, it's currently a spot bill, but CCTA has been very involved in this piece of legislation because it would allow us to implement construction management general contractor method, which is a bit different from the design bid build process, and kind of allows us to bring more efficiency and innovation into the design process. And Ross is really kind of our subject matter expert on this topic, so I'm going to give him a chance to say a few more words on it, but you'll probably be hearing quite a bit about this from us. We're working on some kind of informational pieces as well.
All right, thanks, Lindsay. Russ Chittenden, Deputy Executive Director for the Authority. Construction manager general contractor is a procurement method that's used. I counted it the other day. I can't remember. I think it's about 12 states use this method regularly. There was a bill last year that provided this method to Caltrans for a 6-project pilot, but it did not offer this to local or regional agencies, which we believe was an oversight. So we've worked closely with Assemblymember Fraser's office to have this bill introduced for regional agencies. Simple description of it is that early in your design process, at about 35% design, the owner, or in our case, the authority, would advertise and select a contractor who would come in and provide additional guidance and services to the design team. So it's constructability, it's innovative construction techniques, et cetera. So we enter into a contract with them, pay them for those services, and then we get to use that innovation in construction. The typical process is that upon completion of design, you have an independent cost estimator that provides a cost of the value for the construction contract. The contractor that you've selected submits an independent bid. If their bid is plus or minus 5% of the independent cost estimate, you generally would award that contract. If not, then we can use the intellectual property that the contractor put into those plans and bid it on the open street. So there's no downside to a public owner in this process. So we're very supportive of it. We believe that Self-Help County Coalition will join on. We believe that Transportation California, Will Kempton's organization, will join on. So we're looking forward to working through this process.
Sounds good to us. More control is always a good thing.
I'll let Ross take a sip of his coffee. One of the other handouts that he snuck in at the last minute on me, so I'm going to make him carry the weight on it, is the Self-Help Counties Coalition response to the SSTI and the CTIP studies about Caltrans. And I believe he also attended a hearing, was it earlier this week, on modernizing Caltrans. So I'll let him give a quick overview of that as well.
For our listening audience, will we describe the acronym at the beginning, please?
There's a number of acronyms involved in this one.
But a couple of these are new, so
these are new, and a couple, and one of them's actually recycled with a new meaning. So yeah, we need to describe them. So brief history probably over the last year. Certainly since Brian Kelly has been either the acting or permanent secretary at State Transportation Agency, he's and the governor have promoted a number of activities within and external to Caltrans to look at ways to improve Caltrans, and we've been involved in them the whole way. Malcolm Doherty, director of Caltrans, led an effort of program review, which targeted a number of areas for planning and delivery, the full range of services provided by Caltrans. We've seen some improvements out of that effort already. In the last 2 weeks, about 2 weeks ago, two other reports related to Caltrans were released. CTIP is California Transportation Investment Priorities. And that's an effort that was led by Secretary Kelly to identify short-term and long-term funding options for transportation. The other report that was released was commissioned by the governor. SSTI is State Smart Transportation Initiatives, I believe.
It is on our piece of paper in front of us, but the listening audience can't see that. So.
And that was again, that was commissioned by the governor, wide stakeholder group, led by a number of folks who have experience in state DOTs outside of California. So much of what's described in the letter from the Self-Help County Coalition relates to what, in our opinion, is a lack of understanding and appreciation of the transportation landscape in California. In particular, the SSTI report implies, and it was actually stated in testimony at the hearing Monday, that much of the problem in Caltrans, or Caltrans inefficiency to act, I believe is the term used, is a result of the Self-Help County movement. In fact, our executive director for Self-Help County Coalition, he was not intending to testify, but after he heard some of the testimony, he, including describing self-help counties as sinners, quote, he went up and confessed that, yes, he's a sinner and the 20 members of Self-Help County Coalition are sinners. So that's on record as testimony.
Are they elected stupid and unconstitutional?
So this letter, really, we want to start it from a positive perspective, and I think that happened at the hearing as well. Bill Higgins and Commissioner Pierce, I think you'll probably hear more of this at the CalCog meeting.
Right.
He tried to set a different tone based on a report that came out in 2010, California Smart
2010 Smart Mobility.
Smart Mobility, which was built on the value of the partnership between the state and local and regional transportation, including the COGS, regional transportation agencies, and self-help counties. So that's really the position we have. There's more good than bad in the recommendations in the reports. There's a little bit of concern. Clearly, the main recommendation is to clarify the mission, vision, and goals of Caltrans, because I think there's pretty wide consensus that agency has not kept current with where transportation is in California these days, and align the department to deliver the priority or meet the priority objectives. So everybody agrees that's the necessary act. How that occurs is what's causing some concern. Currently, that's happening primarily in the administration between the transportation agency and Caltrans. I think that has some concern among some of the legislators and legislative staff, and certainly among our sister agencies. We believe we should be more involved in that. So it wasn't real clear at the hearing what some of the next steps are. Secretary Kelly does plan to form 8 groups around 8 different themes in the report, and I can't tell you what those are right now unless I find a piece of paper. But we, working through Keith Dunn at Self-Help County Coalitions, we expect to be very involved in those efforts. I do think that the administration does understand and appreciate that, both Randy and I have been there for a long time, and we can add some valuable insight, having worked in the authority for a couple of years. So we can continue to report on that. And again, I think you'll hear the latest information, because there are things happening quickly. I think it's going to be a major topic at the CalCog meeting.
Is there any interest in having the secretary come to the Self-Help Counties group and do a workshop or work on some of this stuff? I mean, really sit down and get to the nitty-gritty of what we're trying to do, or is it all going to be testimony in committees, which is not necessarily the most productive way of getting things done?
We actually have our quarterly meeting scheduled for next week, and we're doing 2 parts. We're having a board meeting, and then Secretary Kelly's coming in the afternoon after lunch. So
Good.
that will answer that question on how far he's willing to invite us in.
Well, that will be interesting. And that's what day next week?
I think it's Wednesday, Tuesday or Wednesday.
Okay, so it's before the CalCog
It's
meeting.
before the CalCog meeting, yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if Keith invites Bill Higgins to that meeting. That would be probably wise. They work very closely, as you know.
Right. Okay. Well,
That's
I'll
next
check with Bill
Wednesday.
on that and make sure that he's got that on his agenda. Not that he doesn't have a lot to do to get ready for CalCog next week, but yeah, that would be great if we can make some strides in that. Any other questions, comments?
Not on this. Are we looking at the rest of the legislation?
Are we done with that item? Any other issues on the Self-Help Counties Coalition? Okay. Yes.
Yeah, I did leave out one thing. We are well represented on the committee hearing Monday was in Assembly Transportation, and Assemblymember Buchanan and Assemblymember Frazier are both on that committee, so we're very close to whatever that committee does.
That's great. Awesome. It's nice to have people in high places. All right, Dave.
2 things caught my attention. One is just to throw it out there, my favorite, SB 792.
I'm working on it. I'm working
Okay,
on
and
it.
that's why I'm bringing it up. I'm not soliciting any further comments, but my goodness, we being
We're in the
one of the
process
four
of
amigos
rewriting it.
went through, how many meetings of angst about bringing 4 entities together plus their little subs, and now we're not going to require one of them to be there. And I don't know if that's a precedence that, but I understand maybe that it can't be there, and if it moves him, all right, you know where I'm going. The other one is that really has got my interest, and I think it's something that would be nice to do a positive with Mark for a change, that he doesn't think I'm out to get him or something, is I really like I can't believe I'm saying this about taxes. You guys are ruining my R. I'm a little R now, not a big R. It's
all right.
terrible.
It's all right.
But this SB 1183, this bicycle tax, where we could do it, and the possibility of becoming self-help for our trail projects, I don't know if it got this far, but Bishop Ranch is committing to pour a ton of money into just one section of the Iron Horse Trail. We've been looking to get an overpass there. We're doing landscaping on the Iron Horse Trail. I get hints in here that somehow maybe Nancy Skinner's involved because it's that East Bay Regional Park District element in here. And I'm wondering if this isn't something that we don't ask Mark to come in here just to do something nice for him. Or Luby say, yeah, we're supporting one thing out of 400 things that you do. I mean, this one's I think this one's kind of interesting, even if it ties to IFDs or some of the other stuff we're doing. And it kind of got thrown on the back page, and I'm not sure people looked at it. But I would think Danville would be involved in it. They have a very big bike dealer on that. And we've been talking about Pleasant Hill to Pleasanton, and this might fit right in with it.
Is this a return to source?
Yeah, it's local. If I read this thing, it's saying we do it at the local level, local agencies.
Oh, I see that. That's that last sentence, yeah.
I mean,
I've even got a bike dealer in
yeah, well,
Clayton.
that's the other thing I'm looking at. I mean, how many chances do you have to set a tax where they're saying, yeah, this is all going to trails or stuff that you do? And Clayton's fairly close to Mount Diablo. I mean, there might be some people that are interested in this where you have the Lafayette's, Moraga, and Arenda, I know, are very tight. This might be something that they could do. It would be interesting to have, if not Mark, just to say that we're paying attention to some good things that you're doing. Because there is no, I shouldn't throw that.
It sounds like there's definitely some interest
Yeah.
in potentially asking them to come in and present some more information to us about this. I did, it is kind of on here as an additional topic because it doesn't necessarily fit very neatly into the adopted legislative principles of the authority, but that's not to say that we can't be supportive of things outside of those things. So I will reach out and we'll see if we can get them to
We're
come in
in
and give
favor
us
of
some more
alternative
information.
modes
Yes.
of transportation, and that certainly fits within our paradigm. So, Tom, did you have any comments or anything on that? Okay.
I did actually, there was one other set of pages in front of you in your handout. There were two letters. The first one has a big, bold, underlined subject line of protecting the Highway Trust Fund from insolvency. And the second is a letter to Chairman Camp. These two letters are before the APC this morning. MTC has reached out to us. They are planning to take their team back to Washington, D.C., and as part of that, they're doing a big push to kind of put the Highway Trust Fund and the renewal of MAP 21 at the top of legislators' minds. So they have reached out. They're asking all of the Bay Area congestion management transit agencies and partner organizations to sign this first letter so they can carry it back with them to D.C. and then start kind of making a pitch to Chairman Camp to urge them to begin the process of finding a solution to preserving the Highway Trust Fund. They have asked that the agencies sign off by Friday, so actually this would be an action item for this committee to give permission for the executive director to sign this letter for MTC.
Okay, everybody had a chance to take a gander at the letter. Anybody have any problems with this letter? They're going back next week, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
I thought so, yeah. They will miss the CalCog meeting.
Okay.
Okay, I need an action on this one.
So moved.
We're going to tell them to raise taxes on gas.
No, we're saying use it, dedicate it.
All right, okay. You talked me into it.
So are you the second?
I'll second it. Tom wouldn't bail me out. The little R's in trouble now, boy.
All right, I have a motion and a second to send the letter. All in favor? Aye. Oppose? Okay, that carries unanimously. I'm sorry, I cut you off. You had a question.
Well, it was back on the bicycle.
Okay.
Sorry. It was back on the bicycle. As I read that, first of all, I want to understand what a bicycle tax is. Because it says on there, don't we charge a tax when we buy a bike? We're charged, sales tax. So this other tax would be on top of the sales tax.
That is my understanding, yes.
And we're going to call it a double whammy tax.
It's a use tax.
It's a special tax.
I would beg to say that we, as the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, aren't going to call it anything,
Oh.
but Senator DeSaulnier
Right.
may have a name for it.
So would a tricycle?
No.
So it's got to be the 20-inch wheel.
This did come to our attention actually yesterday, which is why you have a handout this morning instead of having it in the packet in front of you. So to be honest, I don't know all of the details. I
Oh,
lifted
okay.
this
That's
why we're
directly
asking it.
from the description of the bills. But
Okay.
I think that we can prepare a long list of questions and ask them
Oh,
to
all
come
right.
in and talk
Then
with
I'll
us about it.
Then okay. Then I don't mind being
If you
smoky
get a
then.
little kid's bicycle, it's 20 inches diameter or less. But a bicycle by definition is two wheels, not
Right.
three.
So the Somerset folks are okay.
But if you have training wheels. Oh, you're worried about I get it. You're worried about trilogy.
I withdraw everything I said.
My 8-year-old grandson has a bike with tires bigger than 20 inches now. So they're starting to get into serious bicycles at that point. But younger than that, yeah, the kiddie bikes and the senior bikes are or trikes are okay.
Well, there's the electric bikes and stuff.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah, well, that's all right. That's all right. They use the trails and we need to keep them up
Yes.
and we're always scrounging for money, so.
Yep.
The concept, I think, is good, but we need to know more of the details. So, amount of money they anticipate to be made, what's the amount of the tax looking at? Yeah, Tom?
We're not being asked to take a position on this, are we?
No, we're just
But, you
saying
know,
we
there's
want to hear more.
I hear everything you guys are saying, but there's a flip side to this, and that is that we subsidize all kinds of transportation options to try to get motor vehicles off the road. We subsidize buses, we subsidize ferries, we subsidize, we put money into trails, that kind of thing. So, maybe this is going the wrong way. Maybe what we ought to be doing is subsidizing bicycles instead of taxing them. On the other hand, when somebody buys a $1,200 recreational mountain bike, I wouldn't have any problem taking a bite out of that. But somebody who's buying a bicycle as basic transportation to get to work, I mean, that's taking a car off the road. So, anyway, we're not being asked to take a position, but I think that I think there are two sides to it.
That's why we're asking for more information. We'll have Mark answer some questions and we can throw all those issues out at him, okay? Very good. Any other questions? You have any other issues?
Nope, that concludes my report. Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Oh, are you permanent now?
I passed probation. You're stuck with me. Yes.
Oh, okay. So you're really serious about the job now. Very good. Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
That doesn't mean I'm going to stop trying to give all my items to Ross to talk for me.
Okay. Anyway, welcome aboard. It's good to have you.
All right. Okay, anything on the federal side? You didn't want to touch on any of those? That's just for information. Okay, very good. All right, then we are on to item 9, which is the mid-year budget revision, and I suppose this goes to Randy and Brian.
That's right. Good morning, APC Chair Pierce and members of the APC. I'm Randy Carlton, the Chief Financial Officer for the Authority. Let me just take a moment and set the table while Brian's getting himself prepared. You see the tagline that we're keeping Contra Costa on the move. One element of that is having the financial strength and the financial transparency that our constituents can look at and trust that we're managing their finances appropriately. How we do that is we report back to you a number of times during the year. At this point, we're providing you with financial information 6 months, with 6 months behind us. We want to give you an update where we stand in terms of our revenues and expenditures. In some years, this has not been necessarily an easy discussion where we're talking about having to reduce sales tax and make adjustments. This year, I would say that it's going to be a fairly gentle and easy conversation because we're not having to make those type of hard choices. So with that, I just want to introduce Brian Kelleher. He too is just not long ago became permanent and has passed his probation. So Brian, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Randy. Good morning, Chair Pierce and committee members. We are here this morning, as Randy explained, to present the proposed mid-year changes to the fiscal year 2014 operating and capital budget. The total expenditure plan is being reduced $28.9 million to reflect the current projections through June 2014. The next few slides will give an overview and explanation of the proposed changes. This slide represents a snapshot of the revenue expenditure categories to be covered. Revenue sources include sales tax, grants, investment income, and other financing sources, the bonds. Expenditures are broken down by the authority divisions and debt service. The authority remains to have a balanced budget, and significant changes are a reflection of the current capital project projections. As we reduce the expenditures on the capital projects, the revenue projections are reduced accordingly. This slide shows the historical data in blue, with $61.5 million in sales tax revenue in 2010 and steady increases over the last several years. The original budget for fiscal year 2014 was approved at $75.4 million. The first 6 months of sales tax receipts are 50% of the budget and consistent with the receipts collected last year. We are being conservative and leaving the sales tax budget alone, which would only be a 1% increase in revenue from the previous year. Retailers have reported better sales during the holiday season this year, but these figures will not be available until late March. We would rather be conservative than ramp up our budget estimates till we see more substantial data. As we just reviewed the sales tax revenue projections, I thought it would be good to revisit the allocations of sales tax revenue. These percentages represent a breakdown of how the funds are distributed to the Programs and Projects Division. Some of the key components in there are the sales tax, or the local streets and maintenance, and the additional streets and road maintenance is about 20%. We just talked about bike, so there's the ped and bike in there. That's about a little over 1.5%. Administration is 1%. Projects Division gets about 42.46%. Grant revenues reflect a decrease of $15.6 million to $93.1 million. Key point, the drop in grant revenue is the timing of projects and not because we have lost any grant funding. For example, we originally budgeted $73.7 million of RM2 funds, but now estimate $60.1 million. The State Route 4 project was reduced by $16.5 million due to the timing of expenditures associated with the project. Several other projects saw reductions or increases based on the timing of expenditures related to the project. Overall, $93 million in grant funds is a great testament to the work done by the authority to secure federal, state, and local funds for the construction of infrastructure in the county, in addition to the funds earmarked through the sales tax measure. At the authority level for all divisions, we have revised the expenditure amount to $264.3 million. The reduction of $28.9 million to the capital projects is the result of timing of expenditures related to the projects. The original budget is always staff's best estimate, but with larger capital projects like the Caldecott Tunnel, the EBART rail extension, and State Route 4 corridor, it can be challenging to predict the timing of expenditures on an annual basis. Again, the reallocation of expenditures from one year to another has a direct offset to the grant revenues associated with these projects. Proposed expenditures for administration, programs, planning are relatively unchanged. The administrative salaries and benefits are $0.6 million and represent 0.83%, which is below the 1% limitation established by Measure J. Programs were left alone as the sales tax budget was left unchanged. There were some minor employee reallocations to account for the reallocation of payroll costs between divisions to reflect work being done on a particular study or project. And debt service remains unchanged at $28.4 million. This concludes our presentation. Sales tax revenues continue to show growth year over year, and grant funding for projects are increasing as well. Expenditures for projects year over year are increasing as the authority is securing additional funding for larger scale projects, and we recommend the approval of the fiscal year 13-14 mid-year adjustments.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions? Tom?
Would you put that first slide back up there again? Yeah. You know the slide, the identical table to that, which is on page 9.2 of the packet, is a different. It's missing some line items on mine. The revenues don't balance the expenditures.
Right. Let me just address that. We made a comment in the staff report explaining that the difference comes from bond proceeds. But to be clear, you're correct. It should be exactly the same.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Keep up the good work. We're looking forward to seeing what April brings us when we find out what the holiday did and whether we can bump that 1% up a little bit higher. That would be awesome. I do have a question in general for staff, and that is, have we recently done a look at what our leveraged money is? Basic, how much is our sales tax? How much are we leveraging for all these projects so that we know kind of what that percentage is. Over time, it's usually been a lot. I mean, we've been able to use our sales tax money for great effect, but.
Yeah, Jack, there's no one behind you. No, we did that last time out of the strategic plan, so I don't believe we've done that for the 2013 update, but we'll do that.
Okay. It would be
It was
probably
3 to
good
1
to know
and-
for our next authority meeting.
Yeah, we can do that.
I think that's a question that we may need to be able to answer very soon.
When
Okay.
we talk about leverage, it's both what Ross commented on in terms of how much in grant revenues we can generate as a result of our contributions of Measure J, but it's also how we use our sales tax measure to leverage into borrowing for projects.
Sure.
And we have recently taken a look at that, and based upon our current revenue projections, we looked at our bonding capacity in the next few years, and we have somewhere in the neighborhood of $400 million of additional bond capacity.
That's impressive. That's impressive. Good job.
Your motion.
Yes.
I'll move adoption of Resolution 13-27A, Revision 1.
Motion by Hudson.
Oh, jump forward, guys.
I need a second, guys. Second by Butt. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
R is finished.
All right. We're going to wake up before we get done with this meeting. Caldecott Fourth Bore, item 10 on our agenda, and Ivan's going to handle this one.
Good morning, Chair, Commissioners. Ivan Ramirez, CCTA staff. This is an action item, and we're asking the authority to authorize the chair to execute amendment number 6 to agreement 261 with Parsons Corporation, which will increase the contract value by $230,000. Parsons and its sub-consultants were the prime designers, or Parsons is the prime designer, along with its sub-consultants for the Caldecott Tunnel, and they continue to provide design services during the construction phase. The additional costs that we're bringing to design services during construction will be offset by savings that we have currently in the program management side that was originally budgeted into the contract. So what's keeping Parsons busy today, you know that Caldecott opened back in November, and we still continue to incur these costs. There are several issues. One of them is They continue to support Caltrans for as-built. All the changes that have occurred need to be basically documented. And there's been a lot of changes, a lot of requests for information, and they have the knowledge and they have to pass that along to Caltrans. There's also, primarily what's keeping them busy is the tunnel systems commissioning and testing. These are the cameras, the signs, the alarm systems, the fans. They need to work in a certain manner. They need to respond in a certain manner. All the systems are being monitored at the OMC, and that system continues to be troublesome, primarily because there's different vendors, and the software that needs to make all of those things work together continues to evolve. So with that, I'm open to any questions.
Through the chair.
Okay, questions?
Yes.
Rob?
How long, you already know I hate change orders, I hate additions, and, I like prices. Is this going to go on to perpetuity, that Caldecott will go on forever?
No,
I know that.
not out of our pocket.
I'm trying to,
You want to know when the end of it is.
yes, ma'am. I'd like to know, do we have a sunset in sight?
Oh, that's a difficult question to answer, in my opinion, and the reason is because we continuously have a target date that Caltrans gives us, and it continues to be pushed back. But it's my opinion that by the end of the summer, we should be completing this work.
And do we know how much? Do we have an exceed to amount of, not to exceed?
You're talking about the construction?
Well, I'm sure they keep the whole thing.
Construction, commissioning,
Right.
all of that. I mean, when are we done spending money on getting the tunnel ready for traffic and operating correctly? I have a feeling that's going to get punted.
Yeah, Commissioners, the answer is yes, we're gonna finish this project. We are still engaged in the executive steering committee and then the project level committees. What he's expressing angst over is the fact that Caltrans keeps slipping the date to finish, and so we're coming back to you for more money for support for some of these issues that they're facing with the commissioning of electronics. So as far as hard infrastructure, there was a closure to remove some signs, but as far as the hard infrastructure, a lot of that is completed, if not all of it. There's a landscaping project that will follow this project. The real issue now is trying to get the darn electrical, fire life, and safety systems working right. So every time they have a hiccup, the 180 days start again. And so Ivan is got a lot on his plate. So he's dealing with State Route 4, he's dealing with Interstate 680, he's dealing with Hercules, but he's also still dealing with the Caldecott. And so we're doing everything we can so that Caltrans can still claim that they've delivered this project themselves ahead of schedule and under budget. But we're concerned about that because the risk registers are showing some increases, and the financial agreements have not changed. We're still on the hook for the last dollar.
So we need some genius from Silicon Valley to get the software all working together. Is that it? Pretty much, huh?
Changing orders.
Yeah, well, we don't want to keep changing orders because every time, if that starts the 180 days over again, we want to stop that real soon.
Absolutely, and just to remind Commissioner Taylor, we did add your second bridge with a change order, so you must have liked that
I
one.
love that.
Okay.
It's okay if it's yours, right?
Bicycle, two wheels.
Okay. All right, well, keep us posted on that. Do we have an action? We need to have it all working together, so.
I'll move the approval for the chair to execute amendment number 6 to agreement number 261 with Parsons as recommended by staff.
Moved by Hudson,
Second.
second by Butt. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That carries unanimously. Awesome. All right. Thank you, Ivan. You're doing a great job of spinning all those plates. Just don't break any. Okay? Item 11, correspondence and news clippings. You can see your packet, commissioner and staff comments. I have Nothing to report except that I am going on your behalf to the CalCog meeting next week, which should be fascinating. We're going to be talking about vehicle miles traveled fees, among other things, and how other states are doing them. And it should be a really, really good conference. So that's my comments. Any other commissioner reports or comments?
Yeah, not so much report or comment, but you keep watching these carbon trade and everything's going on. I think it's just a matter of time before the reforestation protocol starts to surface up as part of this SB 375, AB 32 stuff that we haven't seen yet. And I thought it was amazing that we talk about these great fans to blow stuff out of Caldecott, but it doesn't reduce anything. It just blows it back or into Alameda or whatever. But as we start talking about the next phases where they want to do some improvements on the other side, I think we're going to start hearing about carbon sequestration out of those instead of just blowing it into Alameda. They might get wise sooner or later.
Okay, any other commissioner comments? All righty, executive staff comments.
Commissioners, we've applied for a couple of competitive grants, and so Ross wanted to, how do we normally handle those grant applications? Do we need to come to you first before we apply for more money, or can we just report out in this process?
I'm seeing a head nodding yes over there.
Yes, what?
Just as a general practice, when we apply for grants, the granting agency wants to know that the agency requesting the grant has authorized
That we got
a
political
request.
approval.
But every grant is, not all the grants are the same either. So there may be an exception, but the general practice is the authority would approve the submittal of a grant.
Okay, so if this is a point where time is of the essence because there's a deadline looming before a meeting or something like that, is that something that our procedures allow the executive committee to approve with it going on the consent calendar for future or something like that? Or do we need to maybe amend our procedures to allow that? Because I don't want to pass up a grant opportunity that we may find out about, a week before it's due. So otherwise, consent calendar for sure.
Okay.
Is that causing you heartburn?
No, we get notified with a short window. We have two. One's a federal USDOT grant application, competitive grant nationwide. They didn't ask us whether our board supported the application. The other one was a statewide competitive grant through the Caltrans grant program that had a short window of opportunity as well. And I would think that rather than, I was more worried about not applying, but it was for something that the board would not like. And so we thought about, we went ahead and made the application, and I think you're going to like it because one has to do with express lanes, one has to do with the expansion of the ICM program on Interstate 80 to State Route 4, but Ross will explain that in more detail. But if we can come to some kind of agreement on philosophy, if we've expanded it somewhere and we get some more money, I would assume that as long as we report to you that we're doing this, it's okay, because we can always pull the grant application back and say, no, we didn't really want that $300,000 in money or whatever.
Yeah, I can't see us likely doing that, but we do need to make sure we're all on the same page. So maybe we need to put up a structure for the kinds of, that authorizes most things by default, and only if it falls outside some wild parameter or something that we need to do that. But definitely it needs to come back on consent to make sure that everybody knows that it's happening.
You got Tom.
Tom?
I was going to suggest the same thing, that maybe you could work up a resolution that would give the executive director the authority to apply for grants and show that we have provided that authority and we've agreed. If there's a deadline that's going to miss a meeting date, and then if it's not a deadline, it can come to us on the agenda. If it is, it can come to us after the fact. But I don't know, there's probably some legal way to do this, because I know that a lot of grantees want to see, they want to see a resolution or some evidence that the governing body is on board for this. There's probably some way to do it, as, like you said, as a
The
default
executive committee or
position,
something.
yeah.
I think
Because
the
this happens,
executive committee approval.
all the time.
Yeah.
And you do not want to miss free money.
That's
ever.
right. Amen.
That's a,
So even if it's just running it by the executive committee in some way, I think maybe we need to amend our procedures or something so we can do that, make sure our administrative practices. Right, exactly. Yeah, because if there's a grant match, we definitely need to be able to approve that as a budget change. So, okay.
and they're an urgency type item, task force committee, whatever. But I would concur, if you can't get to APC or you can't get to the full CCTA, I mean, you can call it an urgency item, do the 24 hours, and get people in here from the executive. I don't care if you get 2 out of the 5 or whatever it is, because who's going to disagree with it?
Yeah.
I mean, really what you're doing, it's an action that's required, but it's truly informational. And
Right.
that's really, don't miss anything.
Okay, well, I'll talk about the first two, and I'll give you a heads up on some more you'll see soon.
Awesome.
So, first two we're going to talk about are related both on Highway 4. As Randy mentioned, one of them was a US DOT grant, a MAP 21 grant for Integrated Corridor Mobility Project, similar to what we're doing on Highway 80. And Highway 4 is, at least in my opinion, the perfect platter for this kind of a project. You've been suffering through this congestion for 20 plus years. Now we're getting a fully mature highway corridor. We're getting EBART. So all the traffic that's been diverted from onto the local roads, the arterials, now can get back onto Highway 4, or folks can get on EBART. So the jurisdictions will be able to use those arterials the way they were intended to be used, not for all the cut-through traffic that's happening. So that's really the intent of that, is to take advantage of the entire system, potentially ferries, the intercity rail, BART, highways, roadways. And to complement that, we'd like to explore feasibility and revenue potential for express lanes on Highway 4. So a lot of advantages of that from a mobility point of view, as well as the potential for net revenue that could fund some of the operational costs for the ICM. The Integrated Corridor Mobility has a cost associated with it, a long-term operating cost. So those could work together well. Couple that we'll use under this procedure we just talked about. The state has recently adopted an active transportation program, so there's a state component and there's an MTC component. So we would like to nominate 2 or 3 projects for that, so we can talk about that. We're working with the Park District. They're going to nominate several projects as well. Potentially we could link it with our PED bike programs as the match. So Randy's correct. Sometimes the match could have a budget component. Others, it could be by linking our programs with other programs, and we get the leverage that Commissioner Pierce is talking about. And if you haven't seen it, DOT has announced the next round of TIGER. And please don't ask me the acronym. I'm sure Randy knows, but I think we all know what that is.
Recovery, something
Generating economic, transportation investments.
Investment generating.
There we go.
Recovery.
So the past few rounds, City of Hercules has been an applicant for their project. We would like to either be co-applicant or maybe be the primary applicant for that project. They've come very close based on feedback that they've received from US DOT. So I feel pretty good about that project. MTC has recently sent out a request to identify projects that would be nominated for TIGER, so hopefully we can get their endorsement. We haven't received their endorsement in the last couple of rounds. So we'll flesh out that information. We'll work on a resolution that allows us to move forward on these and then bring it to you guys for final authorization.
Sounds good. Questions, comments? Tom?
Question. Well, you know, I've always had, I've always felt that there's a double edge to integrated corridor mobility projects and express lanes. And clearly there's a good side to it, and there are advantages to it. But the flip side of it is that they are growth-inducing and sprawl-inducing. You know, it's just, in some respects, it's just like adding another lane to the freeway. And when you do that, when you make it easier for people to use the freeway to commute, then they're going to rethink, you know, whether they ought to buy that house out in Stockton and move out there, you know, and commute to San Francisco. It starts to look better all the time because you're getting them from here to there quicker. I've got to think, and I'm just asking staff, I've got to think that maybe there's some way to build into this program and build into the grants something that would, that would mitigate that. I don't have any suggestions, but you guys are smart people. You know, maybe you can come up with something that nobody's thought about yet and get it into the grant program.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why 4 is maybe a little different than 80. They both do have kind of long-distance commuters on them. But 4 has a complete and maybe even extensions to BART. So there's that option. And then for the local circulation, you get back the arterials, you get back the sidewalks. In this one, I am a sinner as well. Sometimes I drive out there and I'll go through the arterials and sometimes even the neighborhoods. So that's one of the advantages there is to give the communities back those arterials and local roads that have been taken away with all the diverted traffic. So we know your position, and a lot of people share that position. So that's where the integrated piece of ICM comes from, is to bring together all modes, which again would out there. There are not a lot of trains. There's 4 intercity trains. There'll be BART, potentially ferry. So it's to consider all modes, not just the highway mode.
Well, and certainly adding efficiency to the highway and to the arterials helps to reduce the greenhouse gas component as well. So aside from giving the community back their streets and not having them clogged up by the rest of us who are avoiding Highway 4 because Buchanan and some of the others, Love Ridge and some of those others are easier, Port Chicago Highway, whatever, that will be a big benefit. So those of us who do have to run out there will think more strongly about staying on the freeway and not jumping off onto local roads. So that's a good thing. And we do have an urban limit line that's pretty firm, so for the sprawl side of things. And hopefully we'll get jobs out there sooner. The better the transportation is, the more likely we are to get jobs out there and reduce the commute altogether, which would be better for everybody.
And as I pointed, it's urban growth boundary throughout the state. I mean, all the rest of these MPOs have to do a UGB also, so
Right.
or some kind of sustainable community strategy. So I think that it's been thought of. I'd be really interested to see on all the, and we get off on these tangents of how it works in with the freight movement when Randy comes back with all the genius that ever comes out of it. I mean, to me, we talk about our problems, but the amount of traffic that goes on 580, and especially freight, is just enormous.
Yeah, no question. Yes,
Yeah.
Randy.
And then MTC's report to Congress has the Caldecott on the front and the Caldecott on the back, so it's pretty nice.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
The picture that should have been on ours.
Well, there's still time. Okay. Any other business? If not, we are adjourned. Thank you all.